Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to season 2 of the Grasp Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Tara LaFon Gooch, and today we're in for a treat because I have a fellow TEDx presenter from TEDx Maid Marian Way with me today. We shared the stage together in Nottingham, England, and we actually practiced a few times offline, just he and I. I'm talking about the one and only Tony Brooks. Tony is a leadership psychologist. He's also an author, and he's got a new book coming out all about survival thinking. And it's such an interesting topic because we think we're such an evolved society, but we still have some of these survival thinking things that we need to cope with that ultimately change the trajectory of our lives, our days, how everything is structured. Tony, thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
It's an absolute pleasure, Tara.
And thank you for being a team member with me as well on TEDx Maid Marian Way. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
That was quite a journey, wasn't it, for a long period of time?
It's so much more work than people realize, these TED Talks, isn't it?
Totally. I'm going to do a podcast episode next week about it because I think anyone who, I mean, you and I think both really enjoyed the experience and got a lot out of it. But I think anyone going into it would need to realize that it's probably a lot more work than they anticipate.
Yes, it's more than just your 15 minutes on the red dot. There's a lot more pre-work that goes into it.
A lot.
But your talk really captivated the audience there that day in Nottingham. I love your stage presence, first of all. You're so outgoing. It's so fun to watch you on stage. You really connect with people.
Yeah,
But
thank
your
you.
talk, yeah, you're welcome. Your talk was on survival thinking. And it's interesting. It's even though my talk was on gratitude and confidence, they have a lot of similarities and commonalities. And I feel like people don't understand how much survival thinking they have in a day, right? And how that impacts their decision making process, right?
Yeah, and impacts their confidence, which is, obviously your big area, Tara. I mean, okay, briefly, the way I talk about it is that survival thinking historically for our species was very much more focused on physical survival. So as a species, we would have been panning the environment for threats like I talk about saber-toothed tigers, but physical threats really. Whereas in modern life, we are still looking for danger and adversity and threats, but often we then look inwards and we start to look at where we might be vulnerable or weak, where we might be exposing ourselves to danger. And then that brings in all sorts of things like imposter syndrome, defensive mindset, and the sort of confidence areas that you talk about, Tara, because it just impacts our ability to be the person we are capable of being, really.
Wow. It impacts the person we're capable of being. I think about that all the time, Tony. Who are any of us capable of being, right? I think these limiting beliefs that all of us have, and we all have them, even though I've written a book on confidence, I'm a human being just like anybody else.
True.
I have limiting beliefs. I have battles with self doubt and confidence. I think any of us do. But it's about who are we really capable of becoming, right?
Yeah, I mean, I often talk about the fact that internally, in very simple terms, I feel like there's an internal battle between our potential self, the amazing person that we're capable of being, but then the more destructive side of our psyche, which is our experiences, our beliefs, like you were saying, and survival thinking is part of that for me. There are a number of things that can hold us back. And only through being more aware, conscious, and understanding and gaining greater control of that can we free up more of our potential. As you said, Tara, we're all human. None of us will ever be able to be what we are truly capable of being because we will have to deal with some of these things. But the better and more effective we are at dealing with them, the more we can free up that incredible power and ability that we have as human beings.
Absolutely. I love that. So in your talk, You had an incident you discussed about losing a tooth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And how this little tiny itty bitty tooth, automatically launched you into survival thinking. Is it going to potentially damage the relationship I have with my wife? How is it going to look when I'm on stage? How's it going to be when I'm on the TED stage? What are people going to think about me? And then all of a sudden, this little itty bitty tiny issue, really, relatively speaking, we have turned it into this big saber-toothed tiger, as you mentioned. And now all of a sudden we're just fight or flight mode. What do we do? What do we
Yeah,
do? And it's funny how we can really do that. We can be our own worst enemies, can't we? We can really turn this small issue into this huge lion chasing us.
yeah, and that's the thing, really. Yeah, I mean, I said in my TEDx talk that we have amazing potential. The human brain is incredible. It's evolved, can become more complex, but it can be our worst enemy. Our thinking can be our worst enemy. I know that you put a post up on LinkedIn about this very slight split in the back of your dress that nobody could see on the day, and that gets blown out of all proportion because our survival instinct and our survival thinking will unfortunately exaggerate problems, distort problems, imagine problems that don't even exist. And all of that's constraining, really, Tara. It goes back to that same thing, really, that it holds back our confidence, it holds back our potential. And so that's why I feel so passionately about the fact that people need to understand, first of all, they're not unique. The kind of internal battles they're dealing with, every other person is dealing with to different extent, and some people become better equipped at dealing with it. And help people like you and I helping people to gain greater control over that means that they can do things, take themselves out of comfort zones, do different things, take on challenges, all of those kind of things from a much better headspace, really.
Yeah. And we all battle with those moments, right? That make us question ourselves, make us question our confidence. And you brought up the unfortunate wardrobe malfunction that I had. Oh my gosh, I didn't even tell you. I didn't tell anybody. I told one audience member that was a friend of mine, and I just said, "Look, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do?" And I thought, it's in the worst possible spot, right? But she immediately helped me, and what did she say? "You're not doing a dance routine up there, are you?" And I said, "Well, no." And she said, "Good, just stay front then." And you know what? It was just what I needed to hear, because in my mind, I'm thinking everybody is going to see everything.
Yeah,
What is this, right? So it's important. It's important. And, it's also important to reframe those things and put them into perspective and recognize too that this is a natural thing we all go through anytime we're facing something new, right?
yep,
Anytime there's going to be a level of uncertainty, a level of uncomfortability and unfamiliarity, you just have to do it and recognize too that there is no saber-toothed tiger actually chasing you, right?
that's true. That's true. And in my book that's coming out in April, which is about some of this, and I don't talk about this in my TEDx talk because it's a different 15-minute talk. But fundamentally, for me, survival thinking can manifest in a number of ways, and 5 of the key ways I talk about in the book are imposter syndrome, ego, defensive mindset, negative self-talk, and group or tribal behavior. And things like imposter syndrome, which you were touching on there, Tara, is when you do step into a new position at work, or you get promoted, or a new career position, or whatever, and you start to have those inner doubts about, am I capable enough? Will I be found out? And again, for me, that roots down into just survival thinking. It's protection. And again, we all experience. So I don't like people labeling themselves with a syndrome, but the term's used a lot. It's become more
Mhm.
and more prominent the last sort of few years. But labeling yourself with a syndrome isn't healthy, because
Right.
what you are having really is a part of the human condition. It's a normal thing when you put yourself into a different position to question whether you'll be exposed or found out or whatever, or found to be not good enough, which is the thing that we all fear in various scenarios.
Oh my gosh, that is it. I can't tell you how many CEOs, CMOs, COOs I've talked to, and they say, I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for them to figure out." And I say, "Waiting for who? Who are we talking about?" Them. Oh, the people that have been employed. You've been employed by for 20 years. You're just waiting for them to figure it out. I think they would have figured it out already, right? So it happens to the best of us, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I think certain scenarios probably bring it out more. So if you, like you were talking about C-suite people, probably when people step up to more senior roles, that's when they will have a lot of internal battles about being found out to be a fraud in their position, is often the expression used with imposter syndrome. But often, again, when we step up into things, we're not the finished article. We're stepping up into things based on what we've been doing at a level and our potential, whether that be career moves or other things, I guess, really. We have to grow, don't we, Tara? We have to grow and improve and learn and find our way through via experience. And so people shouldn't really think that they are expected to be the finished article. When they move into situations, when they move into roles, because the reality is that they can't be,
You can't be. We're all works in progress and we're all learning. And there's no such thing as ready. There's just no such thing. I mean, we could work on ready for 25 years and not feel like we're ready. At one point in time, are we just going to take a leap and jump? Or what point in time are we just going to try that thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's important too. That you can kind of combat that with action, and recognizing it as well, that it is a part of just being a human being, that we're all going to have those feelings. I have those feelings. Again, even though I've written a book on confidence and done a TED Talk about it, that didn't stop me from being nervous before I walked on stage.
Yeah, of course. You're human.
Trust me.
No, every single one of the people who, the 8 speakers that day had, to different degrees, had levels of self-doubt, nerves in their mind or whatever. And it's the way that you handle and process those, isn't it, that's important. As I say, it's normal. It's just, and realizing it's normal is probably helpful, I think. I've often, I bet you found this, Tara, I've often talked to leaders in organizations where they almost feel like they're the only person having an internal dialogue that's not particularly helpful. But the human species is having 1,000 thoughts every single day, and a lot of them aren't particularly helpful. But it's about realizing that you don't need to attach to those thoughts necessarily. You don't need to go down the rabbit holes with those thoughts. You don't need to spiral with those thoughts. You can make more conscious choices about whether you choose to believe that or go down that path with that thought, or say, no, actually, I'm good. And I had a lot of those internal dialogues on the morning of the TEDx talk, Tara.
Oh, poof, gosh, we all did, right? And it takes a lot of courage, but the thing about it is we just jumped and we went for it. And, with anybody, anytime you're about to do anything, especially if it's big, something big, a little bit scary, again, just recognizing that nothing is going to jump out and kill you. It's not the end of the world. And as long as it's something that it's an opportunity and a catalyst for growth, do it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely do it. And you'll find that other people are a lot more gracious than you think they will be. They're not counting your failures. They're not counting any of these things. What they're counting on is they want to support you. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's okay if you mess up a little bit. Nobody's going to account. What they are looking for is you're showing up and you're trying. And I think we internally in our own minds think everybody's watching us and paying attention to every flaw, but honestly, they're not. They're more worried about themselves, aren't
I was
they?
going to say they've got their own internal battle going on that they're more concerned with, really.
That's
Um,
right.
so they're much more preoccupied with that, really.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think for the most part, we've got to look to, I guess, the good in human nature. For the most part, I mean, for the most part, other human beings will look to help you. It's part of our human nature to a great degree, because I was mentioning about group behavior as one of the areas. Group behavior can be a force for good because we're used to surviving as packs and as groups of people. So we have something inherent within us that we look to be helped by other people and help other people, because that's where we know there is an element of strength there. And it's unfortunate when we break away from that, but there is that been that part of human beings since right the origins of our species, going way back, that we know that there's security and safety in the collective, really.
Absolutely. I love that. So, in what ways we've talked about imposter syndrome, you kind of liken that to, a survival thinking. What are some other ways that this survival thinking can impact maybe confidence or the way we show up or the things that we do or participate in or anything like that?
I think that some of the traits like perfectionism and procrastination are very much impacted by it. Perfectionism is that thing that you were sort of hinting at earlier. I was chatting to a client this morning about, the average website never goes out on time. If people are developing a new website or upgrading a website, because they wait until it's as perfect as it can be. And that perfectionism is, again, because we don't want to expose flaws. So we feel fearful of that. So we need to get either ourselves perfect, or we need to get a piece of work perfect, or whatever, because we're concerned about the consequences of that. And we overcook that. We make that much bigger than it actually is. Because the world's not that concerned if you put a website out that's 90% finished and then you carry on working on it. But part
Yeah.
of our internal psychology will do that. And again, procrastination. Often that is a fear-based reaction. People are really tough on themselves that they procrastinate. But often not making a decision is because we fear that making a decision will put us in a vulnerable situation where things could go wrong. And often, yeah, they can go wrong, but we magnify the impact of those. So we keep ourselves stuck, really. But, here's the thing. By staying still and not making decisions, there is danger in that anyway, and more so in modern life. So perfectionism, procrastination are definitely a couple of flavors of, for me, underlying fear-based thinking, really. But we sometimes think there's something different to that.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I battle with clients on the same exact thing, so that's funny. There's no such thing as perfect. No
Very
such
true.
thing. And we could work it again for 20 years on an idea. We could work for 20 years on a website, and you know what? You're going to have to constantly update your website anyway. Just this is just an example, but hardly a month goes by where I'm not touching something up and working on something and refining something. It's
Totally.
I mean, Lord, you know how it is.
Yeah,
Right?
no, totally. And I think the thing is as well, in certain professions, in certain areas of life, if you're a surgeon or a firefighter, the striving for perfection there is more understandable. But in a lot of aspects of life and work, it doesn't need that level of perfection. We can, as you say, put things out, let them evolve, get a product out that isn't quite 100%, but get it out to market, get feedback, change it, evolve it, develop it. But we can often keep ourselves stuck, really, and keep too much in the lab, whatever that might be, rather than getting it out there, really.
Yes, yes. It's not always the smartest person or the most perfect person. I think that makes the most amount of success, but it is someone who takes action. It is someone who doesn't necessarily let those survival thinking or that lack of confidence or limiting beliefs dictate their future. Um, Again, I think we can be sometimes our worst enemies as far as that goes. And perfectionism is very common amongst high achieving people. It's very common.
Absolutely.
Imposter syndrome is very common amongst high achieving people as well. They think they're just never quite right. And that's a problem.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, Tara. I don't know whether you find this as well. So, some people will tell me that that belief that they're not good enough will keep them striving to improve. But I don't think that's a great place to live your life from, really, that continual feeling of lack, not being good enough. But hey, if people believe that is a good way for them to live their life in a productive way and it drives them to do more, then I have to respect that. But I do think it's unfortunate that a lot of people have a continual life of stress, of not enjoying things, of feeling like they need to keep raising the bar higher. And finally, when it comes to the end of their life, I wonder what their reflections would be on living a life like that, really.
I agree. It's no way to live a life, right? And until those limiting beliefs are addressed, that maybe I'm not good enough. And where did that come from? Or it could be a limiting belief of I don't deserve love.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's a common one, and I don't think a lot of people talk about it, but you know what? How is that causing you to show up in life? So if you have this underlying limiting belief of I don't deserve love, it's going to impact your relationships, friendship, it's going to impact your relationships with a spouse or partner. It's also going to impact the way you show up at work. It's going to impact the jobs you go after. It's going to impact the career you have, the amount of success you have. So all of these things, they correlate. And I feel like until we address those limiting beliefs that are holding any of us back, it's really hard to build confidence if we have these things holding us back because they're almost like they feel like anchors sometimes. Just kind of
Yeah, and
stagnant, you know what I mean?
I do, and I think the area that you speak about a lot as well relates to, you talked about being deserving of love, but it's deserving of self-love first of all. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the starting point, isn't it? And I've been talking to senior leaders over the past couple of weeks, and a couple of times we've gotten to the subject of whether they love themselves or not. Because often people don't. And I mean, I would be honest, I think that was a journey for me for a while. I
Yeah.
think that it took me a while, and certainly I mean, I was diagnosed with depression 17 years ago, and then again 10 years ago, and I've had a much better journey since then. But when I got to those places, I certainly didn't like myself hugely, and I think a lot of people don't have the greatest relationship with themselves as a starting point. So it's very hard to expect somebody else to love them if there isn't that liking for themselves or even loving themselves to start off with. And always sounds a little bit sort of fluffy, that, doesn't it, and whatever. But I think it's actually really fundamentally important.
That is so powerful. And I ask anybody watching or tuning into the show right now, have an honest reflection right after the show and maybe ask yourself that question. Do I love myself? And sit in a quiet space. And you know what? Tears may start to flow, and that's okay. It's okay. We need to ask ourselves these questions because if we're not honest with ourselves, how can we fix our problems? How can we develop confidence? How can we say it all the time, and I just like you said, it almost sounds fluffy, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's this term self-love out there, but what does it really mean? And if we don't love ourselves, where did that come from?
Yeah, and some of that will be experiences and external factors, as you and I've talked about before. But I think getting to that place where you feel that you are good enough you like yourself, you know that you're flawed like any other human being, but that you want to continue to grow and improve and become a better husband, wife, partner, mother, father, all those kind of things. You want to continue to improve, but do that from a place of gratitude for who you are, as you speak about a lot. But it is, it is about that. It's being honest with yourself that maybe you haven't been perfect all the way through. Maybe you'll continue not to be perfect. Well, you will continue not to be perfect, but that you're a good person and that you're going to strive to keep doing the best you can, and commit it from a place of foundation of having a good relationship with yourself and liking yourself for all of those flaws and weaknesses that everybody's got. But focus more on the good things about yourself and the good things that you want to do and the things that you're striving to become. As was in your talk, Tara, I think these are all important themes, really.
I'm so glad that you were on my TEDx team with me, because I was fortunate enough to run the talk by you a couple of times, and I never felt like I truly properly thanked you, because you actually helped steer the talk in the direction where it is today.
Hey, well, thank you.
Yeah, I really owe that to you, and really appreciate you for that, because I had to pick your brain. You're an amazing psychologist, right? But it did.
Well, thank you. And I think I felt the same with, we had time together, didn't we, Tara, and time in the group, and listening to other people's views. And again, one of my areas is, a couple of my areas is ego and defensive mindset. We can go quite defensive, can't we, when we get feedback? But it's really good to be open, and you don't have to necessarily do something with the feedback or take it on board and feel it's right, but to be prepared to listen to it is good, really, and listen to somebody's ideas, and then don't get defensive, but say, hey, okay, they might have a point there. I can do something with that and I can improve through that. Or I don't, I welcome the fact that they said it, but I don't necessarily agree with them. I'm going to carry on with, the path I'd started off with. And I think you and I both, you did a hell of a lot of work on your talk, didn't you, at one point, Tara, when you were told about certain TED constraints and what have you. I mean, I really admired the way that you took that on board and you just said, okay, I'll rework it, and off you went and you did that. But we all worked and adapted our talk through the whole process, didn't we? And that was good. If we'd have just sat there and said, no, it's done and I'm not going to take on board any feedback, it wouldn't have been as good as the final result that we got on the day, really.
Yes, absolutely. And that other talk I wrote, it's fine. That'll be a keynote one day, right?
Good. I'm glad that's going to see the light of day eventually.
Yeah, it'll see the light of day, I promise. But a lot of things there, survival thinking also, we kind of get it when we're receiving, constructive criticism or feedback from ourselves. Some of the first things we think of, oh my gosh, this person doesn't like me. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. They're right. I've been found out. You know what? It's not that way. It's not that way. And there's room for everybody to improve. Trust me, there's plenty of room for myself, for anybody to improve. But just have the confidence and belief that, you know what, if you have a message, if you have conviction about that message and purpose about that message, then you know what, it does deserve to be on stage. It does deserve to be written in a book or whatever avenue you want to write or express that idea in. And then we all have value, and not to worry about let the survival thinking get in our way of the perfectionism of getting that message out. I think that's really key and important as well, because we can't let this survival thinking impact our success. We have to approach it with confidence.
Yeah, and it's true. And I mean, even things like, and I guess you put your book out last year, didn't you, Tara? And I put a book out, I think it was 8 years ago, the first one. This one's come out. And it's, I guess it's a statement of where we are now with our level of experience and knowledge. And maybe a book we would write in 5 years would be different to that and more progressed and developed. And so it's okay. And the information we share, some people will connect with it, some people won't. And that's all fine as well. And when we go out and do a talk. It's interesting with public speaking, part of our inner psyche, I believe, and I was talking to, I did some neuroscience training. I was talking to the person who ran the neuroscience training on this. Part of our inner psyche when we stand up in front of an audience, it goes back to primitive group behavior again, because we don't want to be rejected by the group. We're standing in front of a group and we want to be accepted by the group. And so we over exaggerate the fact that we're just standing in front of a group of 100 people to give a talk, or 200 people. I think it was 100, wasn't it, with the TEDx, but bigger audiences or whatever. We're just delivering a talk. But part of our inner psyche is absolutely terrified that they will reject us, they won't connect with us. And so, again, it's about understanding that. I remember doing some coaching with a client when they were doing some speaking at an event, and they rang me the day of the event. They're having a complete meltdown, Tara. And I just said, are you going to die today? Is anybody going to die? Will your business be destroyed? They were going, no, I'm over exaggerating and getting it out of perspective. And I said, yeah, you are. You want to do well. But for me, I don't know about you, on the day of the TEDx talk, I had a lot of inner dialogue about, this isn't such a big deal, go and enjoy it, rather than feeling full of terror and fear that I was about to do something that could completely destroy my life or my business forever. It was a sense of realism and rationality that you have to hook into.
Yes. And I liken it to being a professional athlete. I've never met a very successful professional athlete that says, you know what, before every game, I imagine every way it's going to go wrong. I imagine every way I'm going to fumble the ball and I'm going to break my legs, right? It sounds funny, right? But no professional athlete does that. What do? They focus. They see the picture they want to see. They see themselves catching the ball. They see themselves outrunning the next guy. They see themselves winning the game, winning touchdown or whatever, it is. They see how they're going to win and they visualize it, and it prepares their body for those actions. It's that mental rehearsal. Same thing with professional speaking, or don't you think?
Yeah, and it's power of words. I mean, I like Bruce Springsteen. I'm a fan of Bruce Springsteen, and he now even now he'll go out in front of whatever 100,000 people, and he feels the adrenaline burst. He could label it as nerves, but he labels it as excited and getting ready. And I think that's quite impactful, really, because when I've done work with people and helping them with public speaking, it's don't start feeding yourself with language that's going to be unhelpful. So if you go to an event and you start saying, I'm really nervous, I'm really nervous, I'm really nervous, that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you say, I'm excited, I'm looking forward to it, whatever, then that's a different can of worms. And you can choose. I say again, it's about choice. You may be feeling all those things inside, but call them something helpful. As you say, it's part of that mental preparation before you do something, really.
Yes, I love that. Well, Tony, what a pleasure. So many gold nuggets throughout this episode. But, I challenge everybody that's listening to really identify those survival thinking that we all have, right? And let's identify them, let's understand them, because I think if we acknowledge that they're there, we can be much better equipped to really manage them in the future and reframe them with positive things instead of negative things that continue to reinforce those habits and behaviors. But Tony, what a pleasure. What's the best places for everybody to get in contact with you?
Ideally, I would say LinkedIn, really. My company's called the Leadership Training Workshop. I've got a website called thetonybrooks.com, which is just TonyBrooks.com, but really LinkedIn. And I know you're very much, that's very much your arena as well, Tara, but that's the best place to find me, really. If you look for Tony Brooks, Leadership Psychologist, I'll pop up and connect, and by all means, pop me a line if I can help in any way. It'd be great to have a conversation.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in today. I encourage everybody to share this podcast Give it a review. This podcast has really helped a lot of people. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from my listeners. So I have been hearing some really good feedback lately from listeners who have been saying things like, I never thought about developing confidence that way. And you know what? I've tried this thing that you had with this guest, and it really worked and it changed my life. I've had listeners come back and say that because of this show or a particular guest's insights, that they've been asked or they've been able to ask more money in their careers and do different things. So this show is proving that it has a positive ROI, but more importantly, a positive impact. And that's really the goal. That's why I started this podcast, is to have a positive impact across the globe with different people and help them genuinely. So share this podcast with your friends, family, or coworkers. Give it a review and keep tuning in every week because I interview amazing people like Tony on the regular. Thank you so much for everyone who has tuned in today. We will catch you on the next episode. Take care.